Hello, everyone. I'm Justin Martinez. I'm the Event Program Coordinator for TAO. Welcome to today's Data Analytics Strategy and Leadership Virtual Collaborative Discussion on Analytic Business Value. We're really thrilled to have you with us today. We will be using a polling application called Mentimeter today. You can scan the QR code or visit menti.com and enter the code on your screen to follow along with the presentation and then to participate in the upcoming polls and questions that we'll be asking you. I'll continue to share this instruction slide on the screen. So if you don't join now, you'll still have an opportunity to do so in just a few minutes. Now, a really big thank you to CSG Pro for sponsoring the DASL community. Sponsors like you make our communities and events like these possible. For those of you who don't know, CSG Pro specializes in software and data analytics consulting and has been building modern, scalable software and data solutions since 1993 that are hell-bent on your success. So now, without further ado, I'm going to hand things over to our community co-chairs, Matt and Lee.
Thanks, Justin. My co-chair Matt and I have been leading this for the last year and a half, 2 years. And today we're really excited to welcome Eric Ast from Enervy. He is the Data and Analytics Director with 15 years of experience developing holistic and people-centric strategies, teams, and analytic reporting and visualization products. Today he's going to talk to us about showcasing the value of your analytic strategy within your organization. Eric, I'll hand it off to you. Unmute.
Yes, thank you, Leanne. And yeah, so Justin, we can hop over to the next slide. Yeah, so I just before I hop in and share a little bit about myself and today's agenda, I just want to say thank you to Leanne and Matthew for facilitating this group. I am relatively new to the state of Oregon, and I will say that in general, I think the best thing a person can do to be successful in data and analytics is be part of a strong community, and that's particularly true when you are new to a place. And so I think this is a wonderful group, and I just want to say thanks to the co-chairs for putting in the extra effort to actually make it happen. It's a really wonderful community to be a part of. And to follow on Leanne's intro, yes, I am the Director of Business Intelligence at Enervy. We are a technology company, and really the goal for Enervy is to make energy efficiency actionable. We work with utility companies across the country. We're in tens of millions of households with our marketplace solution. And the marketplace solution brings energy efficiency to the forefront of better purchasing decisions. So it's really a way to help consumers understand in a very actionable way the energy efficiency impact of their products, not just from an energy perspective, but from a cost perspective, which is quite powerful towards making better decisions. Prior to working with Enervy, I led the data and analytics work at C40 Cities. It's a global nonprofit working with 100 of the world's mega cities on climate policy. And so there I served about 200 internal staff and about 3,000 folks that worked with cities, embedded city staff around the world, really helping to facilitate better data management, better use of data across the world in the fight against climate change. Justin, if you wouldn't mind, next slide. So yeah, for today, really this, I think one of the nice things about the format of these events and why I was excited to be a part of it is it's really about collaboration. This isn't about a clear playbook and specific solution to problems. It's really, in my view, about starting the process of asking the right questions and of really getting the juices flowing in a way to learn and build community. So the end goal and really the focal points are framing conversations around the business value of analytics. Obviously that's an important part of the job, day to day, long-term strategy. So that'll be one of the primary topics. Next, obviously, framing is nice, finding value is good, arguing and being convincing is even better. So we'll talk about one of the other key questions, which is once you've done that, how do you build those arguments for growth, for more impact, more resources, And then once again, and I think this is there's only so much that can be done in an hour. We're planting seeds here. It's really about, getting things started. What are some good resources? What are some good learnings to follow up and really continue with that connection and support? So we'll go next on to our first poll, which I think will be a nice way to kick off this conversation. So I'll leave it to Justin to reiterate the instructions, but I believe they're pretty solid from what you can see.
You can scan the QR code on your screen or go to menti.com and enter the code on the screen. And it might prompt you to go past a few slides.
Don't be shy with multiple answers. This is great. I think we've got a nice initial set. Can just kind of recap. I think, these are great. These are all things that really drive investment data analytics, right? We want KPIs. I think sort of the mandate of if you can't measure it, you can't manage it, really, is at the heart of a lot of data and analytic capabilities. You got to prove that ROI. You can't just be flying blind on business decisions. You really need that evidence base. So I think these are some great, items, certainly kind of in line with my experience of really what drives investment. Justin, can we hop to question number 2? And so, on this one, I'd really like to take kind of a broader tact here. So same idea, same question of really what drives investment, but let's think outside of analytic teams right now, more broadly to our experience, either working for other teams within an organization or just observing. Could be anything, HR, sales, product teams, engineering teams, comms. I'd like to pose that same question. What drives investment in these teams? This is great. Yep, I'm seeing some really nice answers. A lot of overlap here. KPIs, some things that are the same as what one would look for in data analytics. Some similars. We'll give a little bit more time on these, and then we can grab a summary. Maybe everybody wants to be nice about what they think about what drives decisions on other teams. I'll just wait for us to catch up a little bit with how many we had on the data front. I know there are some strong opinions on this topic, certainly. Yeah, existing investments and department structures. So kind of inertia, char, charisma. I like that. Yeah, so I think we've kind of hit on some of the similarities and differences here. We've got, I think, some great insight. Charisma matters. You've got personalities are a big part of it, relationships, revenue. So I think we've got a nice kind of mix of things that are quite well aligned and overlap with the decision making that we perceive goes into analytic capacity, but also things that we didn't touch on when it comes to data and analytics, right? We didn't really hit on these same ideas of quite as much of legal requirement and charisma, inertia, existing investments, things like that. So I think it's great. So thanks to everybody for your input. Can move on to the next slide, Justin. So yeah, so I think I cheated a bit and took a guess at what input might be, and I think overall there's really a sense that, and this is true, that arguments about data and analytic capacity have to be highly empirical and analytic, and that's true. And though I put that in that category of necessary but not sufficient. And so absolutely, we talk about ROI, we talk about M&B, how do we test, how do we optimize, what are the ways that we really use analytics to create that argument, to create that capacity. All those items that we talked about and added to the question of how do other teams grow, obviously there are differences. HR has requirements that data analytics don't, legal, things like that. So there's certainly unique characteristics, but for the most part, the things that drive investment in other teams also apply to data analytics. And it's important, in my experience, to think of that because it's additional tools in your tool belt to make good arguments and to really communicate value effectively. And so we've got this idea of this messy sort of non-empirical world that plays heavily into the decision making around data and analytic capacity. And so we've all run into, I think, some of these animal acronyms: the HIPPO, which is the highest paid person's opinion, the WOLF, which is working on the latest fire. I think some of these get a little bit obscure. Zebra, which is zero evidence, but really, I think, really aggressive or really authoritative. And these are things that drive decisions. We know that it's true. We don't always sort of look at the evidence. Sometimes it's these things. Sometimes there just isn't particularly great evidence. So we're working in an environment where there's ambiguity. Decisions get made out of ego and fear sometimes, inertia, fads. You kind of want to do what seems to be popular and du jour, and also sometimes legal requirements, whether that's GDPR or other things. So I think it's very easy, and certainly I do this a fair amount, is to really just focus on that first column and think, it's an analytic team, I need analytic evidence. I think the crux of the breakouts is really to start to think a little bit more and talk about really strong ways to unify this second group. So Justin, if we can move on to the next slide. So yeah, so I think, just to kind of prime the pump a little bit with that thinking is to tee up the breakout sessions and to really get an opportunity for folks to discuss these issues together and really share, resources and personal experiences that really kind of hint towards this unification of those two realms and can really help foster a good sense of shared experience and learning. So, really the first key question from the group is, and this is in line with the previous slide, is what tools exist to promote the value of analytics? We touched on a fair number with the survey and the follow-up, but certainly not exhaustive. So definitely between empirical evidence and other arguments, what's in our tool belt that we can really use to talk about how valuable data and analytics work is. The second is really about organizational decision making. So sort of underpinning this idea of promoting value is understanding what values are in play from the get-go. What do organizations value? Every organization's a bit different. They make decisions in different ways. And so how can one, look at all these different pathways and think about which ones are most fit for purpose given the nature of values and decision making within an organization? And then the third question is really, so you've done these things, you thought about it, so what? So what can you actually do to execute on this idea and balance kind of short-term needs and goals with longer term ideas, and also be committed and stay the course, but also recognize that there's some flexibility involved. So these are, I think, prompts that'll hopefully get folks asking the right questions and engaged in a good chat. And so I'll hand it over to Justin to facilitate or to enable the breakouts.
We're gonna stay here so everyone can work together.
Good stuff. Even better. So yeah, so I think we'll take about 15 or 20 minutes to chat together and share thoughts on this. But let's open things up for the first question. And I know folks got to start to think about this a little bit with the surveys. What tools exist that can promote this? Empirical, non-empirical. What are different ways in which the value of analytics can be conveyed?
I can take a stab at it if nobody wants to chime in.
Yeah, thanks, Greg.
Yeah, I think one of the tools, it could be as simple as a PowerPoint, a Visio, or even just like a flow that just kind of shows, the people and the process, and the lack of, either oversight or just a lack of cohesiveness, and so somehow having a depiction of why you need analytics, because there's just some disjointed parts, I think is helpful.
Yeah, certainly. I think there's, people are visual creatures. Such a big part of the data and analytic practice is the visualization component. I think that gets a lot of focus, and there's certainly room to bring that to the table on these kind of bigger picture strategic fronts. Absolutely. Thank you for that.
For me, I think being able to show time savings. So explaining what it takes to stand up a data model and produce what our executive teams want to see, and how it can be scalable with the right resources and the right people to deliver those insights faster.
Yeah, and building on that, I think being able to identify and quantify the little pockets in the organization where this work is already happening, but probably inefficiently. So there's a certain amount of kind of going and tracking down the person with the ridiculous spreadsheet in one corner, and the person with a similar but kind of different spreadsheet in a different corner. And even just like holding those two things up together, I think can begin to paint a picture.
Another thing I'm seeing are like these like auto discovery tools you know, where it's like, hey, just hook it up within an environment or whatever. I think, like I was blown away by Lucidchart. This was, you know, just a random thing I saw that they were promoting, that they can just like pull all the metadata or even actually create automatic like flows of how your data's like working. And I was just blown away by that. And so that's a really easy one to say, oh yeah, like we got a problem here, or we have an opportunity here.
I like that. I think that's, yeah, we've used Lucidcharts. I think it's got some really nice capabilities, and to sort of follow on that and what Matthew had to say is the little really kind of, I'll call them annoying inefficiencies, are kind of a double-edged sword, and they can be really powerful if used well. I think we've all seen those processes that are not quite efficient, but they don't happen very often and they're not that big impact. And so it's okay to just kind of tolerate that it's not ideal, but the cost is relatively low. But generally speaking, from a sort of management and leadership perspective, in my experience, people really dislike inefficiency, just the idea that something is happening within an org that could be better, even if it isn't really that big of an impact. People tend to want to fix it. And so there's definitely an opportunity to identify those things, communicate them really well, and leverage that kind of, you know, desire for folks to pull at threads and to tuck things away. So I think that's a really great, really great addition.
You know, that makes me think that I really like these first two questions together, because in my mind, the tools that we might use to promote the value are deeply tied with organizational decision-making and culture. Because to some degree, like, first thing I would do is, how have other people made pitches? You know, what do their slide decks look like? What kind of, what holds currency within the organization? And those then become tools that are among those at my disposal.
Yeah, absolutely.
Probably one of the most valuable tools.
Please.
I was going to add whatever tools used for ticketing or work tracking. If you have a well-crafted summary, a statement of work that is clearly the result of data and analytics, that's a great tool in itself. If people are saying, "Hey, this is being done because we know something new."
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Chris. Yeah, and I think there's a lot of really powerful, you know, kind of literal tools. You know, the rubber's got to meet the road somewhere, you know, and I think we all sort of on a day-to-day basis work across, you know, whether it's Trello or Lucidcharts or Jira or any of these. You know, I also, you know, think that, you know, and I'll sort of take a broader view is, you know, I think of things like storytelling as a tool, things like understanding, you know, people's not just pain points, but also, you know, really kind of what drives a desire. You know, I think in the previous note of the second survey, I think somebody had mentioned, you know, inertia is a big part of it. You know, in some of this decision making, I think one of them was keeping up with the Joneses or something along those lines. So I think there's also a really powerful tool of understanding, you know, and this is not empirical at all, is really what, you know, what gets people excited. It's fun. Technology is sometimes, you know, it's fun. People want to try new things. Often there's obviously downside to trying new things, but you know, so there's also kind of that idea of leveraging, you know, these underlying values that get people excited and are really less empirical. There's not a great way to quantify that or to you know, do some M&V on it, but it can still be really really powerful. So certainly I think those are things that can help you know, move things in the right direction as well.
I think one thing I do, it's less about the value of analytics and more of the value the analytics team brings. In my organization, I'd say we already have, there seems to be an appetite for analytics and data. People want that and are asking for it. And so I try to be very transparent with what we're working on, what's on the backlog, and making that available so that they can see as they give us more resources or less what the impacts are on that.
Yeah, I love that. For a while, you I've been through a few iterations of trying to make my backlog and our work products transparent, because there always seems to be more demand than we can produce, and that runs the risk of frustrating people and kind of calling into question our value. So there's something about that transparency and being able to demonstrate, there are 40 things that we're being asked to do, but we can only do 6 right now. And being able to demonstrate, what, those were the right 6 to do. That's, I think, a way of demonstrating the value.
And the need for the work that your teams are doing, because if you have a backlog and you're forced to prioritize what gets done first, that right there is showcasing the value of what you're doing for the business. Did we lose Eric? He looks frozen to me. Should we go ahead and move on to the next question while we wait for him to join in?
And this is something that I have to say, I'm excited about this next question. How can we determine what drives organizational decisions and craft our arguments accordingly? And the first thing that comes to mind for me, and I don't know who all was, if any of you, other than Leanne and Greg and I were there, but what was it, about 18 months ago, right before COVID, we had an in-person event, and Dave Wells from Eckerson gave a whole presentation, this whole interactive thing around organizational culture, and tying that to analytics and tailoring this idea that you need to tailor your analytics approach to the culture of the organization. And it makes me want to go dig up those old slides, because I feel like there's something about being able to understand and thinking through how does my organization make decisions? What are our values that has to shape the arguments we make?
Yeah, when I see this question, I thought of what you said earlier, Matthew, just around like kind of looking around and seeing what other people in the organization are doing to make a case for resources. And so I don't know, I think it'd be hard initially in a new organization to do that. You kind of have to be there and kind of see what works and learn from that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's one of the savviest things anybody can do within the analytics realm, is to just look at other teams and figure out, where the sparks are flying, how they're getting, resourcing, how they frame arguments, and really what is more successful or less. And I think it becomes sort of, if you can understand that, most others don't have the ability to build empirical evidence the way that an analytics team does. So you get all the goodies of observing what they're able to bring to the table with this extra, capability that brings things to another level, and that can be quite powerful. And I apologize that I fell off there for a moment. So if I lost the crew mid-sentence, apologies. One of the things, and I'm curious to know if anybody else has leveraged this, is one of the resources that I find myself coming back to a fair bit. It's a book by Michael Watkins called The First 90 Days, and it's designed for career transitions, as the title states, kind of how do you do really well. Good, thanks, Rick. How do you do well, when you start a new role, whether it's within an org transferring or a new organization? But I think its advice is pretty useful at any point, whether you're just trying to assess a problem or come up with a strategy. And one of the frameworks that they present is the STARS framework, and I believe the acronym is, and it's kind of a way to assess what situation your organization is in. And is it a startup? Is it a turnaround? Are you accelerating growth? Are you realigning? Or are you sustaining success? And obviously there's pretty much every org is going to be a little bit across those 5 buckets. But I find that to be a really helpful way, to kind of hit on this second question around what drives organizational decisions. And a lot of it is situational. Obviously, a company that's looking at accelerated growth is going to look different than a company that's looking to right the ship. So I wanted to share that as a resource and open things up if other folks have similar frameworks that they've used, or if they've any personal experience with that one in particular.
Something that we talked about in our last DASL community event was understanding what your business is driving towards. So we have our defining objectives for the year. So we have our key areas of focus. So by understanding what we are striving for as an organization, and then tying that with what my business stakeholder is asking of me, so that I can really understand the heart of what they're trying to accomplish. So I guess listening and looking for resources that are telling you what's important to craft your message.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, and I think we've really touched on a lot of good thoughts for these first couple of bullet points, and I don't want to rank them in terms of difficulty. All of these have their nuances and their challenges. I personally find sort of this third one to be the least natural and kind of the most difficult personally, which is really execution. So you've listened, you have a decent sense of where the org is, and now you've got a 3-year roadmap or a 3-month. I sometimes come back to this. I think it was DJ Patil, the previous CTO, which is you prototype and build prototype for 1, build for 10, engineer for 100. Release daily. I think it's build weekly and strategize yearly. So there's these kind of apocryphal, kind of nice summaries, but I'd love to kind of get a sense from folks of if there are any frameworks or really approaches that that have yielded success around this idea more of putting this into implementation on a daily, weekly, and to be on a lot of these things annual basis.
That makes me think that this has been a thing that we've dealt with in my organization. Execution and prioritization are easier when there are clear organizational objectives. And, so in the times where we've had a lot of clarity as an organization about what our business priorities are, that ends up becoming this really easy, maybe not easy, but nice framework for then connecting our work to. But in the times of transition where there's been less clarity and maybe less alignment in the business as a whole, that's for me where this has become very tricky. And in some ways, actually, where there's been a lot of value, because there's something about if you can align, if you can figure out how to harness the power of analytics, maybe through some quick cycle delivery to help bring clarity to the organization, there's so much power there.
Yeah, absolutely. And Matt, maybe I'll dig in a little bit on that idea. Are there particular kind of cadences and frameworks that you like to use? Is it, a broader monthly, I know you mentioned earlier sort of how important it is to communicate to people and show them, the full body of work, so they think more about the 6 things that were really smart to choose and do, and not the 100 things that you had to say no to. Is that, a monthly backlog grooming? Is that, a brunch, BI lunch and learn every few weeks? What are some of the kind of more tactical ways in which you find you can achieve those things?
One of the things that seemed to work fairly well for me was we've been, as an organization, gone through a few iterations where we have annual objectives, or one thing that worked really well for us was 120-day plan, so 3 cycles a year. And those provided some kind of natural, high-level sort of breaks for evaluating and planning. But I've tended to actually just have a rolling 3-month plan in front, plus maybe projecting that a little bit further when I'm really asked to, but things change within 3 months. So I don't spend a whole lot of time beyond 3 months out. But then with my team for execution, we've used 2-week cycles as just enough protected time that the team can accomplish something really valuable, and that's a short enough time frame that when some big thing comes up, we're able to pivot to whatever the new priority is. So the combination for us of those 2-week cycles and then the sort of rolling 3-month ahead plan has proven pretty useful.
I'll echo that. Okay, thanks. Yeah, I do 2-week sprints as well, and I find that's a great balance for the team, where they feel like someone comes to them with someone, they don't have to say no, or we can't get to it, but they also don't have to derail them from what they're working on, and they can feel like I can say yes and say we'll look at doing that in the next 2 weeks. And so that's been really good to kind of create to kind of keep some flexibility and not feeling completely overwhelmed and still being focused at the same time. As far as the longer range planning, organization in the past has set some pretty clear goals for the whole organization. And so anything that we're asked to do, I try to tie to one of those and say, okay, how is this lining up? How is this supporting one of these organization goals? And then the things that aren't, it's a lot easier to kind of say, well, this really doesn't make sense to be working on right now. And it doesn't answer every question, but it definitely, at least I feel better about it. And I feel less overwhelmed when all the things that we're not getting to don't align to any of those organization goals. It's like, okay, there's a good reason why we're letting those things slide.
What I was going to say is that in our organization, our analytics roles are spaced out so that there's one analytics and operations team per major department in the company. So we come together every single month as analytics and operations professionals to talk about what's on our roadmap, what our upcoming changes are, any impacts that might affect one of our counterparts across the organization. And that helps us as we are building out our quarterly sprints.
My organization does about the same. We repurpose our monthly teams review board meetings. We also incorporate like roadmap kind of things. And we also do weekly kind of data review meetings where we kind of review the queue of what kind of analytics are going on right now, have discussions about that. That's pretty effective.
Thanks. Curtis, how do you structure those weekly data review meetings? I've kind of toyed with a few different approaches.
Yeah, I keep it very regimented. It starts off with a review of the current demand for reports, and I identified if it's internal by the executives or if it's from a customer. Of course, they're treated based on various natures. We do a quick prioritization. So I use DevOps as I love like using their little boards they have there. And so that's kind of our main tool we use for tracking our report. I call them data requests. And some of them I flag it as a data or it's a report request and stuff like that. And so we prioritize, we pick what's going on, and I have a bucket for what's on hold because sometimes it's, as with all analytics go, that sometimes there's a wrench that needs to be unclogged somewhere. because the system doesn't exist or something, something severe, you know. So after we do the quick review, we go on to like the weekly trend. We have some measures that we kind of identify as the lifeblood of the company that we try to promote, and it changes about every 3 months or so. New ones come on board, and there's some ones that we like that kind of been groomed and we look at all the time now. But yeah, that tempo though, that our weekly tempo of my organization is what I think is, you can start seeing this heartbeat of these measures that people didn't see before, which is bringing, well, it's my job role secure, that's for sure.
Very nice. Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, I think it's a really nice mechanism for building transparency and keeping people engaged, but also letting people know that yeah, there's a lot of good work going on and the priorities in play. But yeah, so I think I'll say thanks for all the ideas. I really appreciate folks. It's not always easy to turn that microphone on and see your picture pop up. So I appreciate that. And I think Justin, to that, I think we're at about the 15 minutes from the hour. So if we can transition over to the summary, I can do a quick wrap up and talk about next steps. Yeah, and I think given that we were all in this together, pretty good transparency, so no need to quite unify ideas across. But I think from my perspective, and actually I think we can skip this one, Justin, just to and then go to the closing thoughts. So from my perspective, and I think everybody's contributions today were really helpful, is that these kind of arguments, building analytic capacity, it's certainly about data, but it's not just about the data. And knowing about these broader organizational values and decision-making practices, it's really, really useful, if not critical, towards getting the most out of your team and getting the most out of what you can build and to really get buy-in. And I think one of the themes too is, in sort of, I kind of, given what people offered, is obviously, this is it's a process, it's a journey, it's a grind. It's monthly or quarterly, or Matt, I like that. I haven't thought of trimester schedules for quite some time. I like that you break your year into three chunks. But it's this balance of constantly keeping people engaged and building this longer vision, but also, these weekly and daily mechanisms of reminding folks that, work is happening and priorities are in play, and really, constantly reiterating that value. I think, people across every organization, no matter how big or small, are drinking out of a fire hose. And so the more you can be present and share content, the better. And then I'll sort of the last item, and I'll gather this information and kick off a thread of conversation in the DASL community forum. It's really just to, I was going to reiterate that, I think this was a really wonderful start to a conversation, but certainly a start. Not any clear, concrete, answers that'll drive us for the next decade of our careers. But I think, really the intent is to, start a good conversation and to recognize that this is a process, and there's a good community here to keep up with this conversation. So I'll recap today's notes and add some links to some of the resources that were mentioned, and get that conversation started in the community forum.